All right, I think I am live. Today I wanted to teach you guys how to backflip on a trampoline. I'm gonna do a tutorial. If this live does well, I'm gonna do a whole series on it, but I'm gonna go ahead and hop right into it with the first few steps of how you should learn a backflip. So I'm gonna hop right up here. And the first thing when I'm teaching someone how to backflip, like if this was an actual lesson, like I'm teaching someone in the gym, or if I went to someone's house and like taught them, the first thing I'd make sure that they were comfortable with is just bouncing on the trampoline to their back and then going from their back and doing almost like a backward roll in the air to their feet. I like progressing with drills and other skills that make you feel like you're doing backflip without. So my goal today is to make sure that I teach you guys in a way that you could learn completely by yourself without someone there to help spot you. So this is like the best way that you could learn how to backflip on trampoline completely by yourself. Hopefully, like just watching this, you could like learn along with me. This is a live, but this will also be a separate video saved on my YouTube after. So you'll be able to go and re-watch this if you ever had the chance to get on a trampoline and just need someone to work through it with you. Hopefully this will be really helpful for a lot of you guys. So what? You can hear me good on there, Ashley? Okay. All right. So here's how to learn a backflip on a trampoline. The very first thing you want to get comfortable with is just jumping to your back. So when you jump to your back on a trampoline, if you have never jumped to your back before on a trampoline, you need to progress into it slow, because if you jump to your back on trampoline and you don't land flat, meaning your butt and your shoulders hitting the trampoline at the same time, your head will whip back, which doesn't feel great. I'll demonstrate one. I don't suggest doing this. So if you land leaning forward like this, your head will whip back into the trampoline, which doesn't feel great. So the first thing you need to get comfortable with is jumping to your back. And the safest way to progress into that is start super low so that you don't get that head whipping back motion. You want to start super low. You can even start sitting if you want and bounce from your butt to your back like this and get super comfortable with that. Once you're comfortable with that, then start doing it from a low squat where you just go back and up to your feet. And once you get comfortable with that, go higher and higher until you're high enough to where you can do a backflip, which actually isn't that high on trampoline. You probably only need to bounce about this high. If you can do that, you're bouncing high enough to do a backflip. Get super comfortable with that before you do the next step. The next step is working on, instead of just jumping to your back, is doing the rest of the rotation where you go from your back all the way over to your feet. So I'll demonstrate what that looks like first. It's called a pullover. You jump to your back, you pull your legs over your head, which is why it's called a pullover on a trampoline. Now, the best way to learn that is not to just huck it, because you can land on your head if you do that. That's super dangerous. The safest way that you want to learn it is by going purposely crooked first. And what I mean by that is when you land on your back, whichever way your feet kick, if they kick forward, you will land forward on your feet, which is what you did in the first step, jumping to your back and go to your feet. Watch the way that my feet kick. In order to land on my feet, I kicked my feet down and forward to land. So if you want to roll backwards over your head, your feet have to kick backwards, but that's super scary. So start by kicking them at an angle. So instead of kicking my feet forward on this one, I'm going to kick them sideways so that I do almost like a side flip type motion. That looks like this. Okay, so that's the next step, is learning how to do that. Once you have that down, turn that into a backward roll by, instead of kicking your legs sideways, turn a little bit and kick them over like a shoulder roll. So it is really helpful if you do already know how to do a shoulder roll. I would suggest learning that and getting comfortable with that motion, because that's what you're gonna do, but with a bounce. And that'll look like this. So I'm pulling my legs over my shoulder, just like this. Okay? The reason we learn it over our shoulder first is because if you do it over your shoulder, there is no possible way you can land on your head. If you go straight for learning a pullover over your head first, you can land in this position, and you don't want to land in that position. That's how you hurt your neck. So get super good at doing a back pullover over your shoulder like that first. That way there's no chance of landing on your head. Then when you're ready, finally do the last step of pulling your feet straight over your head. And I highly suggest doing this low with your hands by your head. That way, if you do land kind of low, you are essentially able to catch yourself in like a handstand position that looks like this. Okay, so it's like doing a bouncing backward roll. Once you get comfortable with that, Pickle, get out of here. Got my dog under the trampoline right now. Watch out, I don't want to bounce on you. That's my dog, Pickle. You can barely see him right now. Get out of the trampoline. All right, he's out of the way. Once you're comfortable with that, start bouncing higher and adding that same height that you want to backflip. So bounce to your back, pull your feet over your head, and that's essentially a backflip but with a bounce in between. So that's like the first big step to getting a backflip, is get super comfortable with that motion, because it feels just like a backflip, but much slower than a backflip. It's a great progression for learning backflip. And with all those steps I just showed you, it's a nice and safe way to learn how to backflip. Now the next step is, instead of using your back on the trampoline, is to actually start jumping and not using your back, so you can do the whole flip in one bounce instead of in two. So the way to learn that is by using your hands first. Really similar to the way that we just did using your back. You're gonna use your hands by putting them around the side. You're actually gonna look over your shoulder, all over the side, put your hand behind you like this, and jump, or literally just walk around the side like that until you're facing back forward. Once you have that down, start jumping a little more each time into it, so it looks more like that. And take this process super slow. I'm going through it kind of quickly, but feel free to do this as slow as you want. Some people, this might take them days. Some people might get it as fast as I'm teaching it right now. But once you have that down, start trying to use two hands and going more like this, where you're just doing like a super crooked backflip. It's fine to start with that. It's actually a really safe way to learn it, because that way if you bail, you don't land on your head. Each time you go, start trying to, instead of reaching down here, reaching a little more up, so it starts to turn into a back handspring, which looks like this. Nice crooked back handspring, and eventually a straight back handspring, because you'll get so comfortable with it over time that instead of throwing here, you'll start throwing straight over the top, and then you'll do back handspring. Just like that. Now, it probably won't look that clean when you first do it. It'll probably end up looking a little more like this, where you jump too high and don't really use your hands. And you kind of land in all fours. But that's the next step to doing backflip, is to not use those hands. So literally keep doing the same thing you've been doing, but try to jump a little bit higher until your hands aren't touching anymore. So the first few might look a little bit like this, where you kind of land hands and feet at the same time. And then eventually you'll be able to just not put your hands down, and you'll do the entire backflip where you're looking like this. And if you use that whole progression I just showed, that's how you learn a backflip. I'm actually gonna come check the chat real quick. If you guys have any questions about that process that I just took you guys through for a backflip, feel free to ask them now, because there's a chance I missed something, or maybe you guys don't have, I didn't clarify something good enough. So if you have any questions about the whole process I just explained, please ask questions on that now. The person who says you are scared of landing on your neck or hurting your neck during this, the main thing is you want to use this full progression to make sure you start by going off axis first. The reason I teach doing a backflip and going off axis first is because it's literally impossible to land on your head if you're going off axis. So if you're really scared of landing on your head, do this off axis version a bunch, because even if I completely bail, the worst that should happen is I land on my side and not my head, therefore my neck can't get hurt. That's why it's safer, if you're learning by yourself, to learn off axis first, and not doing it straight over the top where you just send it. Now, if you have a coach that's able to spot you, it's a different story, because that spotter can keep you from landing on your head, and therefore you don't have to learn off axis first. But yeah, the biggest thing is you want to learn by throwing off axis first before going straight over the top, and that's because it's impossible to land on your head if you're off axis. Now, a lot of gymnasts don't teach it that way, because it can sometimes lead to bad habits. So if you're a gymnast, they never really use going super off axis, because if you get stuck in that mindset of throwing a flip off axis, it can be hard to get it perfectly straight. But I think it's safer in general to learn off axis if you're learning by yourself, and that's because you can't land on your head. A lot of people are asking right now, how do you learn a backflip if you're doing it off of trampoline? I'm actually gonna make a whole separate video, a whole separate live video on how to do it if you just have grass and nothing else. So make sure you guys tune in for that next one. But it really is similar to this process. There's a couple extra steps involved, but it's pretty much the same thing of the last few steps, where you start by going off axis like this, and eventually you kind of turn that into an actual backflip by jumping a little bit higher, and eventually going straight over the top, just like I showed. So doing it on grass is very similar to those last few steps, but the first few steps you can't really do, where you jump to your back, because that's painful to do on grass. But I will be making a whole separate video on that soon. How to do turning motion, I already explained that. If you guys missed the beginning of this video, make sure you go back and watch. Oh, here's a good question. How do you tuck? So a backflip terminology. Let's get to that first. Terminology for a backflip. Backflip just means literally any type of backflip. A back tuck is where you backflip and do a body position called a tuck, where you're grabbing right below your knees on your shins and doing this. The reason that it's important to learn how to tuck, if you're someone who is wanting to learn specifically a tuck and not just any type of backflip, is because it gives you faster rotation. So a little physics lesson here. When you take off into your backflip, you want to take off leaving the trampoline in this position, fully extended, with your chest slightly pushing forward so there's an arch in your back. And that's because when you go from this fully extended position on the takeoff and in the air, you shrink from this position into a tuck, the action of that happening speeds up the flip, which is why you see people do double backflips like that, where they throw super hard, fully extended, and then they shrink up in, which speeds the rotation. So let me go give you an example of that. If you wanted to learn a tuck with the process I just showed you, where you don't have someone spotting you first, yours is probably going to end up looking kind of like this when you first do it, where it's like you're kind of reaching your hands out and it's hard to get into a tuck. And that is the problem with learning on your own. It's really hard to fix that and shrink into a tuck instead of doing that kind of sprawled out position. And that's because if you learn how to tuck during it, it's a little harder to do that like off axis, but you can start doing it by just slowly trying to bring your knees in more. So if you get to this point that I just explained how to learn a backflip and you're still sprawled out and you want to learn how to tuck, literally just start as soon as you finish jumping, trying to bring your knees in a little more each time until you can grab them. So for example, if yours looks like this to start, where you're kind of reaching out, try to start actually bringing your knees in a little more and just tap them. So it doesn't have to be a perfect tuck, but see if you can just tap that leg until eventually you can bring it in. Now, one thing that really does help with learning a tuck is not throwing your head back. There's a few reasons why you don't really want to throw your head back in a backflip, but when you first learn it, you're probably going to naturally do that because you're going to want to see the ground as soon as possible. But talking about the physics lesson again, a few reasons why you don't want to throw your head back in a backflip is, like I said, you'll rotate faster if you're in a tight ball, which is why people tuck, they're trying to get more rotation. And like this, I am taller than I am like this. So therefore, if you tuck your head in, you'll rotate faster. So that's one reason you might want to keep your head in. Another reason you might want to keep your head in is not just so that you can rotate faster, but just for like looks of it. Some people, depending on what sport you do, cheer does their backflips different, tumbling does their backflips different, parkour does it. And parkour, a lot of times you have to tuck your head in to avoid hitting your head on something like in a cast gainer or a Kong gainer or any type of thing where your head is getting close to the edge of something. So there's a few reasons why you might want to keep your head in, but the main reason is for rotation typically. But yeah, the best way to learn how to do that if you're using this process is just slowly bring your knees in more and more each time and try not to throw your head back. Like, it is a hard thing to practice, but practicing trying to stare at something as long as possible while your legs ride up into you is actually a super helpful thing to practice, and it'll take time. That one, it didn't take me too long personally to learn how to backflip on a trampoline, but learning how to keep my head looking forward and not looking for the ground was extremely hard and took me months to figure out. I'm gonna look at some more questions from the chat real quick to see if I missed anything, but I think I'm just about done here with this live. So any other things you guys want to see real quick before I hop off? Weird question. If I learn a backflip, it's hard to read these chats. They're moving through so fast. Oh my gosh, how do I get it to stop? I'm still new to this live thing, so I don't know how to not have the chat keep going. Am I going to make a separate video on how to backflip on or with trampoline and without? Yes, I said that earlier. I am going to be making a whole nother separate video if you don't have a trampoline to learn. How do you do triple? If you want to learn how to triple backflip, I highly suggest learning in a gym, because with learning a single flip, you can keep it really low on a trampoline and learn it by yourself relatively safely. But once you start getting into doubles and triples, I just highly suggest having either a foam pit or someone mat sliding you, because it's going to be a whole lot safer to learn in a facility. If you don't have that option, I suggest trying to travel to a nearby trampoline park or somewhere where you can learn that, because it's just significantly safer to learn with a foam pit. Yeah, so I wouldn't suggest just hucking it on a backyard trampoline. People have learned that way. It's just more dangerous, and I don't suggest it. Someone just asked, how do you know when to untuck from your flip? Short answer is just you have to practice it a bunch, and you will kind of feel when to open for it. One thing I do personally is a little bit of a feeling, a little bit of spotting. When I jump into my backflip and I go to tuck, I'm looking forward as long as I can. And as soon as my butt kind of comes up in front of my view and I can't see it anymore, I know I pretty much need to open right about then. But depending how high you jump and what surface you're on, it can differ a lot. So it's pretty much just a lot of practice to know exactly when to open up from your flip, which is why it is important to learn on something like a trampoline or with a bunch of mats behind you in case you do open at the wrong time. Ways to add style to a backflip. That's a really good question. So if you already have a backflip, or you just finished learning your backflip and you wanted to make it look a little cooler, there are a million different ways that you can make your backflip look cooler, and I'd love to elaborate on that. So let's say you just learned how to backflip, you finally just got it down, now you want to add the next step to it. I'll make some more videos on this in the future, but here's a few quick ways that you could start adding it in. First one I feel like is a really good one to learn is flash kick. So if you can already backflip, make sure you can already backflip where you can see the ground before you're landing on it. So make sure you can flip and see that ground before you're landing on it, before you try any variations. You want to be very air aware and know where you're at in the air before you start adding variations. But when you're ready to add variations, a good first one is a flash kick, which means when you're upside down, you're going to try to just kick one of those legs out. And if you're not in like martial arts or something, then you can just kind of kick whenever to make it just kind of look flashy. But for someone who's in martial arts or any type of sport where they have to kick a target, you're gonna wanna look wherever that target is. And I think for most people from martial arts, that target is usually directly above them. So not only would you wanna get used to looking at the trampoline, seeing that, but you'd want to get used to looking above you as well and looking here as you kick that target. So flash kick's a really good variation to learn. Another good variation is literally any body position you can think of. A really fun one is like a Spider-Man position where you're kind of grabbing like that, because you can still rotate really fast in that position, but just mess around with different body positions in your backflip. There's a million different ways you can do it. You can do it while doing like a leg grab. You can do it where your leg's sticking out. One that I really enjoy doing is doing a straddle where my legs are out like this, but I grab here behind my legs, because I think that looks really silly, and I love silly looking tricks. It looks like this. So there's like a million different variations you can do of backflip, and I think that's a really good next step after you already have your backflip. But literally think of any body position that you can do, and you can do like a backflip in that position. So literally just like whatever your flexibility or whatever positions feel like maybe slightly awkward to you, you can challenge yourself in doing those. And that's the answer to that question. Let's see if I get one more before I hop off, because the sun is going down, so I could probably only do about one more before it starts getting dark here. Can I do a quick tutorial on Cody? I'll make a separate video on how to Cody. A Cody is a backflip off your stomach on trampoline, and I feel like I'm just gonna have to do a different live on that. So I'm gonna start trying to do these almost daily. If you guys are interested in learning more about parkour and how to break stuff down into steps, I'm gonna start doing these more often. So tune in tomorrow and I'll do another tutorial on something. If you guys comment right now, whatever you guys want the next tutorial to be on, that'd be super helpful. I'll look at those tonight once I hop off this video, and I'll make my next tutorial on whatever you guys are interested in. It could be literally anything. It doesn't even have to be a trampoline trick. It could be like a parkour vault. It could be cheer. It can be just like tumbling stuff. It could be a bar trick. You guys just let me know. But I think I haven't seen any other questions that really apply to this specific video with how to learn a backflip. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and hop off here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until the next tutorial live stream, thank you guys for joining in. I'll see you next time. Now I have to figure out how to stop this thing. Oh man, I don't know how to stop the live. There's gotta be an option here. I haven't done that many lives yet. Oh, here we go. All right, bye, I figured it out.